All righty, same to you. 800-450-7876. Our next guest, Dr. Salima Marriott. Brother Haki, welcome to the show. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right.
Yes.
Good morning,
Yes,
Dr.
yes.
Marriott. Good morning, Brother Haki. Tell us
Yes, good
about
morning to
these
you both.
freedom rides that you guys are starting for this summer.
All right, I'll let Mama Salima start.
All right, Dr. Marriott.
Yes, well, we are going to be visiting on tour to 10 southern states. All are not actually southern, but most are. It's a tour that will allow us to see various historical sites within these states. We're going to begin in Washington, D.C. this Sunday, when we will visit the Martin Luther King Monument. And from Washington, we are headed to North Carolina. And I'll let Brother Hakeem continue.
Well, certainly. And let me just add to that, Mother. We actually we do have some tickets to the African American History Museum, and that's in the D.C. area. So that's just a stone drop away from the MLK MLK Memorial Statue. So we are looking forward to that. We actually were there earlier this week, so I was there for the sixth time. So I'm excited to be going back and having some young people with us. Carl, that's going to be the difference in this. We have approximately about 30-something young people from 6 different schools in the Baltimore area. And so, we just going to be going, down south. I mean, I'll just kind of go through. We actually may stop, Mama Selena, in Virginia, Farmville, Virginia, just for dinner real fast, but then into Greensboro, North Carolina. There's the International Civil Rights Museum, which is there in Greensboro. From there, we leave to get to Greenville, South Carolina. And once we're there, we actually have some folks flying down to watch a one-woman play called Unbossed on the legacy of Shirley Chisholm. And although she is out of New York, we're just going to add that to the civil rights movement, being that she's the first woman to run for president. So we thought that was an interesting, unique ad. Then we head on to from Georgia to Selma, Alabama. I'm sorry, maybe Jackson. This is Atlanta first. I said Atlanta. And then we head to Alabama, and for both Selma and Birmingham. Birmingham to Jackson, Mississippi. And then I think we hit New Orleans. And then what else? Little Rock, Arkansas, and then Topeka, Kansas. Yes, okay. Little Rock, Arkansas, and then ending up in Topeka, Kansas. So, I mean, it's a power pack full of, it's total 8 days. And so, Mama Salima, what were you saying that not all of them are south, right? Or southern.
Right, and Arkansas is not necessarily always counted as well as Topeka, Kansas.
Oh, thank you for clarifying that. Yes.
Yeah, they are important stops for civil rights. Brown versus Topeka.
Right.
And also the Little Rock 9.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that.
And Dr. Marriott, can you tell some of these listeners, especially some of the young people in our audience, about the actual freedom rides that took place during the Civil Rights era?
Say it again.
Can you tell some of our listeners how the freedom rides back in the Civil Rights era, how that started, why it was done?
Well, it's not just the freedom rides. I think the civil rights movement probably got started. Let me make sure. Well, the first freedom ride, of course, was the rides that they took in Montgomery when Rosa Parks was arrested, and they stopped riding the buses. And then, of course, there were freedom rides to bring into implementation laws that have been passed in regard to international bus travel. And then there were freedom rides to the South in terms of helping with voter registration. So there were all kinds of movements. They all just were not freedom rides, but I just spoke to my interpretation of freedom rides.
Right. And I guess
especially those, the ones that are most noted for are those freedom rides to make sure that the U.S. law in terms of international bus travel was not segregated. Buses were not segregated. And that did happen. That was the major freedom rides to ensure that international bus transportation was not segregated.
Right, and I was going to say the most famous, I guess, freedom ride that everyone, well, not everyone, most people recognize was the one with Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, where they were shot and killed. Remember that murder? Down there's those civil rights workers that are going to help our brothers and sisters in the South have the right to vote.
Yes.
Are you seeing a collection because two of them were Jewish? Those young men who gave up their lives, and of course. Viola Louisia, I think that's her name, how her name is another white person. Are you getting other ethnicities on this your freedom ride that's coming up? Hello?
Well, Hakeem has been the primary working with the organization.
There may be like instructors. Most of the young people are going to be black. But what I will say, most of the young people are from Baltimore City public schools. But yes, but to answer your question, Carl, historically speaking, and I was watching some documentaries, and we, just being objective and open to understanding that at particular times there were people that fought and got assaulted very badly that were, Caucasian, in that those freedom rides. And so, but I just wanted to add to that, and just so we know that not everybody in the civil rights movement agreed with much of the freedom rides. I will say, because James Farmer and I hope Brother Leo is listening, during the early parts, that they thought that the freedom rides were actually a little radical, right? They thought that they were starting too much trouble or instigating the violent mobs that would come out. And so just me, re-evaluating this as an adult, and I know a lot of people may have done things like this as young persons, but, just evaluating where we are from here. But to answer your question, yes.
Are you going to point out the fact that, traveling to the South, you from the North and the law enforcement agencies?
We're from up South.
Up South, okay, or from up South, going South. That you would look like an outsider, a troublemaker coming into the South. Are you going to point that out to the people on this trip? And I'll let you respond on the other side. We're going to take a short break, 16 minutes after the hour. Folks, you want to join Dr. Marriott and Brother Haki on their Freedom Rides for 2022, reach out to us, 800-450-7876. We'll take your calls in the next 4 minutes right here on 1010 WOLB and 95.9 and 1450 WOL, where information is power. And good morning again, family. Thanks for staying with us. It's 22 minutes after the hour. You want to get in on this conversation? Remember our numbers. Phone number is 800-450-7876. Dr. Marriott and Brother Haki, our guest, and they're in the route of Freedom Rides 2022. That's what they call it. And for those of you who know your history, know about the Freedom Rides back in the Civil Rights era. And my question to both of them was, are you going to point out the differences, being from the North, and you say South, North, or whatever, going into the South, what sort of difficulties that would present for people back in the Civil Rights era?
Oh, most assuredly, it was related to public accommodations. And, of course, the civil rights movement had a very strong student component, and it also existed here in Baltimore. Students at Morgan in particular were very much involved in integrating what we now or most recently knew as Northwood Shopping Center, which was adjacent to the university, most of which is now owned by the university. But it was a struggle there around the movie theater and for students to be able to sit where they wanted in the movie theater. And then there was the struggle in downtown Baltimore. Most notably known was a drugstore chain called Reed's, and you could not go in there and drink a Coke or have anything else. So Morgan students was very much involved in that sit-in and ensuring that African Americans in Baltimore City were able to sit at Reed's. In addition, there was department store segregation, department stores in Baltimore where you could not try on clothes, etc. And so we experienced it here in public accommodations. It was experienced in public accommodations throughout the South, especially restaurants. And then what we talk about often is segregated public transportation like buses all through the South. And often this would change once you pass, you may come from New York, which is north, down towards the South. And when you got to Maryland, the segregation began along Route 40, and it continued all the way into the South, the public accommodations. And so we mentioned that we will be going to Little Rock, and of course that has to do with the segregated school system. And the Topeka, Kansas case, which actually led to the desegregation of schools. And so the other states that we've talked about had the more traditional public accommodation and voting rights. Voting rights was critical during the civil rights movement, and it is still critical. It is just in a different face currently that we are receiving it. But times that we are experiencing now are the flip side of what we fought against in the civil rights movement.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that with us because, we have some young people listening and they probably don't know, they thought that America as we know it today was always like that. And I'm glad you've shared that history, especially for young people in the Baltimore City area, because they probably figured, we don't have a problem like that. We hear about the water fountains and the different water fountains. But how long ago, before I take a call for you, how long ago was those restrictions placed on our people in the Baltimore area?
You mean how long ago were they lifted?
Yeah.
In the 60s.
Okay.
In the 60s. I was a student at Morgan in the 60s. So these situations exist. Probably the children of the day, the young people of today were not born because my children were born in the 60s. And so it had an impact. It had an impact. One of the reasons that my husband and I decided to, when we left Morgan, to go to New York was because we were very clear. My husband was from New York. He had been educated in New York, and I was from Baltimore, that his educational experience was very different from my educational experience. And you could see these differences by other students who came from the South, including Maryland, from those students, and there were many at Morgan, who came from New Jersey, New York, and further north. the educational experience was different. So we said our preference would be, because we believed our daughter would have a more quality education if she attended and entered the school system where her father had attended and entered than where her mother had.
Gotcha. 800-450-7876. Gene is joining the conversation. Gene's calling from Baltimore. Gene, you're on with Dr. Marriott and Brother Haki.
Good morning, Dr. Marriott and Brother Haki, and happy Friday to you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you guys very much. This is such a pivotal point in the civil rights movement, the Freedom Rides. And whenever the conversation comes up, I always bring up the name Diane Nash.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and my question was going to be, do you remember who Diane Nash was? And obviously you guys do. But I'm going to tell a little story about her. But when John Lewis died,
actually, she was the leader of, when I said my interpretation of Freedom Rides, I didn't mention her name, but it had to do with what Diane Nash led. And Diane had come from Chicago to go to school in the South at Fisk in Nashville.
Fisk University. That's where the school was. Remember, that's where the school was with Reverend Barber. What's his name? Marion Barry was there, and what they did was they trained black people to do the sit-ins, and they would literally play role play, and they would curse each other out, pretend to put cigarettes out on them, and really, just humiliate them because, they were trained to go out to do the sit-ins. What you guys are doing is so instrumental, and young people should be aware. And one other person I want to mention is Roy Wilkins and Poor. They started the Freedom Ride. But when they got to Alabama, they literally almost got roasted in a bus.
Yes.
And it stopped. And literally, they stopped it. And it was Diane Nash, who was 18 years old, who understood that the next phase was going through Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana. So this young woman signed she filled out her, what do you fill out when you're going to die? I forget what it's called. Will. Right. She knew that the chance of her getting killed was paramount, that it was, there was a great chance that she was going to get killed. But she was only 18 years old.
Wow. Right.
Yeah, God bless you guys, man. And I really appreciate what you're doing. And I just hope that people understand what you're doing and what you're hopping back on and reminding people of was one of the most significant movement. And then I want to say one other thing. When they got to Mississippi, they got arrested. They were in jail for almost, I think it was 2 years before Robert Kennedy got helped to get them out of jail. They were in jail in Mississippi for the Freedom Ride, and they completed it when they got out of jail. Thank you guys again very much, man. Thank you, Hakeem. Thank you, old man.
Thank you.
All right, and you want to respond to what he just said? And by the way, Diane Nash is still with us, but go ahead, Brother Haki.
Thank you for him clarifying that it was certainly Diane Nash that, once there was a major assault on some Freedom Riders, that she the one that picked up the mantle and said we're going to keep it going. But interesting, he said something about the will, because at our first stop at the African American History Museum, there's a stool, where you sit in like a counters at the African American History Museum in D.C., and they ask you, will you sign your will? Now, I mean, just simulating what they experienced during the sit-ins and, what they had to go through. So they ask you, will you sign a will? Will you go back after being assaulted? Yes or no. So we're going to have all the young people sitting at the counters in D.C. On Juneteenth. So strategically, we're leaving on Juneteenth to go down south. So thank you, Carl.
All right. And a note for you, I guess you're stopping in Greenville, South Carolina. One of our listeners down there. Are you going to make that stop?
Yes, Greenville, South Carolina. Actually, there we're going to show the unbarred. Well, I'm sorry, we're doing an actual one-woman play, and a lot of your DC listeners who may, be aware of the Black Box in DC, this is where they perform the actual unbossed play a few times, and we went to the opening, and so we decided to bring their whole production one-woman play down there. Sister Dominique, she's out of DC. She's coming down to do a one-woman play. So we'll be in Greenville on the 22nd. So Greenville, get ready. Come on out and connect with the Freedom Rides of 2022.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and thanks to the folks in Greenville for checking in. It's 34 minutes past the hour, folks. If you want to speak to Dr. Marriott or Brother Haki, reach out to us, 800-450-7876. We've got to step aside so our listeners can get caught up on the news, weather, sports of the day. We'll be back in 4 minutes right here on 1010 WOLB at 95.9 and 1450. WOL, where information is power. Good morning again, family. Thank you for staying with us. 20 minutes away from the top of the hour. Our guest, Dr. Marriott, Brother Haki, talking about the Freedom Rides of 2022. We'll get back to them in a moment. Let me just remind you, coming up next, we have Dr. Dennis Kimbrough. You know him from all the books, his Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice, a whole bunch of motivational books for Black folks. Well, he's going to join us. And then we're going to move over to our Black Music Month special with one of the Shylights, or at least the last member of the Shylights is with us. That'll be Marshall Thompson. And later this week, you're going to hear from a futuristic researcher, Brother Sadiq Bakari. Professor James Small is going to talk to us about what's going on this weekend. And Dr. Francis S. Welson's mentor, Neely Fuller Jr., will be with us, as will Larry Young. Those in Baltimore know that Larry sat in the seat for decades. That's a long time for people in radio. But Larry's going to tell us what his next move is going to be. And Candy Staten is also going to be with us. So if you're in the DMV, keep your radio locked on 95.9 and 1450 WOL. If you're in Baltimore, keep it locked on 1010 WOLB. All right, let's go back to Dr. Marriott and Brother Haki. And Dr. Marriott, I understand that you were very close friends with Gloria Richardson. Can you tell us about that friendship?
Well, I was not a close friend of hers, but one of the things, my interest and my research has focused on the women of the movement. And Gloria Richardson, born in Baltimore, Maryland, family migrated to the Eastern Shore, Cambridge, Maryland, was an extraordinary civil rights leader. In fact, and she just left with us this year. She just passed this year. At that time, she was living in New York. And so, therefore, she has been of great interest to me because she really integrated class as she built that movement on the Eastern Shore. She had a great following of participants, not following, she had participants who were of the working class, and some may have been even impoverished from the Eastern Shore. She challenged the Kennedy brothers, President and the Attorney General, and really, finally, I consider, brought them to their knees and forced them to intervene in what was going on in Cambridge. So they look at her. She's looked upon as one of the greatest civil rights leaders, and even Marylanders do not know as much about her as they should. She went to Howard University and actually got involved in the movement in the early 50s as a student at Howard University. She was born in a middle-class family. Her father was a pharmacist, and they owned a drugstore in Cambridge, Maryland.
Now, is she the one in that famous picture where I think there's a rifle, a bayonet, and she sort of just pushed it away against some police officers? Is that her picture, or is that somebody
I'm
else?
sure. Or if it's not, it's a facsimile. She was the most militant, I believe, in my opinion, of the leaders, and the first of that type of leader. She was clearly an advocate of the beginning of the Black Power movement. You know, H. Rap Brown was in Cambridge at her invitation.
Right. I know she also was in touch with Dr. King and Malcolm. Is that true as well?
What do you mean by in touch?
Well, she knew them. They knew her.
Yeah. I mean, she subscribed. She subscribed to both philosophies. But what I want to emphasize is really the civil rights movement integrate and bring in class into the struggle, and as she did, and made it an issue. The economy. It's the economy. It's the economy. And that was before Dr. King's projected Poor People's March.
All right, folks, you just joined us. It's 50 minutes away from the top of the hour. The voice you just heard was Dr. Marriott, just along with Brother Haki. They're taking a freedom ride, a group of folks on a freedom ride 2022. Brother Haki, what date are you guys leaving? Is there still space for folks to join?
Well, there's a possibility, so they have to, kind of give us a call like real soon. But there is some space available. But I wanted definitely to emphasize again that, many people, as I talk to a lot of people, they just want to know, can I go? That's the first thing that people say, because, even myself, some of these places, I don't know as much as we should know about the civil rights. Of course, we know about the, Birmingham's and Atlanta, where Dr. King is from, and Selma, but the New Orleans, the Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, some of these places we don't know as much. Greenville, of course, but, we're looking forward to the opportunity to talking to some of the local people, the local scholars in these areas, and people who lived during these times. So that's still making those connections to individuals is what building movements contemporarily looks like for me. Thank you.
Yeah, but and it seems like these freedom rides are not just for children or youngsters. It's also for adults, right?
Yes, sir. Yes. Oh, absolutely. And that's what I mean by myself. And as I talk to people, they like, when is the next one? And so that's a beautiful thing. So hopefully we will look towards that, in the future as well. So I'm here in the Baltimore area, so everybody knows me. So we look forward to making this happen as well again. But leaving on Juneteenth here in Baltimore and going straight to D.C. to the African American History Museum.
And Dr. Marriott, along that journey, will you be, informing or instructing or the folks who are on that trip about the particular areas that they're in and what took place historically?
Well, what I've done actually is I have taken excerpts from my book about the women of the civil rights movement. And so that will be part of a handout that will be given to the participants. And so to the extent that there are questions, I'll be available to respond, but they will have, including Gloria Richardson and Diane Nash that came up, much more details about their contributions to the movement, because that the women, when they had the 1963 march, which was kind of a culminating activity of the civil rights movement, women had to struggle to have an opportunity to participate because they were totally left out. And even when they agreed to bring them in, they only wanted one woman to represent all of the women. These were the civil rights leaders. They did not even have a seat. They did not have a part for Dorothy Height, who was a part of the group, to speak. So women who were involved in the civil rights movement had to encounter much sexism within the movement. And so, therefore, their contributions, when you look at the external struggle and the internal struggle, their contributions and their ability to hang in there and to stick in there in spite of the internal circumstances just has so much significance. So much significance.
All right, 800-450-7876. Leo's joining us. I understand Leo's one of the original Freedom Riders. Leo, welcome to the show. You're on with Dr. Marriott and Brother Haki.
I called you up, Leo.
Yeah.
All right.
Good morning, Brother Nelson and Brother Haki. I applaud what Brother Haki is doing. Of course I do. I'm Leo Burroughs Jr., and I was the Public Relations Director and Recruitment Committee Chairman for what the Civic Interest Group. The CIG, or Civic Interest Group, was based at Morgan College at that time. It's now Morgan State University. We also worked with Walter Carter, who was the president of the Baltimore City chapter of the Congress of Racial Equality. And we helped to spearhead with our great queen, Gloria Richardson, the Freedom Rides on the eastern shore of Maryland, which encompassed eastern Talbot County as well as Dorchester County, where, of course, Cambridge is the county seat of Dorchester County. We worked closely with the Maryland State Police under Major George E. Davidson, who was the field force commander of the Maryland State Police, to limit the number of injuries and or harm inflicted on Freedom Riders at that time. We would come down Route 50, which was the main artery to the eastern shore, and every half a mile we had state troopers posted, thank God. And some of them were racist, but they did their job professionally for the most part in protecting the demonstrators. And, of course, I heard you mention H. Rap Brown, and Stokely Carmichael and others played a big part on the Eastern Shore. But I'm so glad that Brother Haki is taking up the blood-stained banner, as it were, to educate our youth at this point in time. And I remember the denial of Gloria Richardson as a speaker during the March on Washington in August 28th in 1963. They didn't allow her to speak as such, although she was on the platform. But she certainly enjoys all of our praise, and the members of the Nonviolent Action Group and the Cambridge Action Group. Remember General George Gelston, when the National Guard was mobilized on the eastern shore of Maryland? He was called out under the administration of the governor, J. Miller Tawes. And it was a turbulent and violent time. But fortunately, I don't believe anyone got killed. We had folks who were injured. And the watermen, who were the leading blue-collar racists at that time, were out in force to prevent the Freedom Riders from spearheading the effort for integration and justice and fair play. So I'm just glad you guys are speaking to this issue at this point in time, this historical fact, because if you don't do it, our young folks will never know, our people will never know from whence we have come as a people. So keep up the good work. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leo. Let me ask Dr. Marriott this, because he mentioned that it wouldn't let Gloria Richardson speak. And you mentioned you sort of alluded to some sort of misogyny that was taking place during the movement.
To the form of the movement, if you noted, I did, because I'm very conscious. Leo never called my name. He only referred to you guys and called Hakeem and you by name, and he does know my name.
Yes,
is
hopefully.
Is that part of the misogyny that you sort of alluded to?
I'm not calling it misogyny.
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to call it misogyny, because misogyny is actually woman hatred. And that is not what I think exists. I think that what was in existence was part of a larger culture. And the civil rights movement came on the kind of like on the tail end of World War II.
Right.
And
Dr.
our
Marriott,
larger
hold that thought right there, Dr. Marriott. We got to take a short break so our stations can identify themselves down the line. I'll let you finish your explanation on the other side. Folks, you can join us, 800-450-7876, 6 minutes away from the top of the hour. We'll be back in 4 minutes right here on 1010 WOLB and 95.9 and 1450 WOL, where information is power.
You're rocking with the most awesomest. All right, let's go. Keep rocking.
And good morning, and thank you for staying with us, family. It's a minute after the top of the hour. Our guest, Dr. Marriott and Brother Haki, they're taking freedom rides starting on Sunday, Juneteenth, through the South. And before we left, we were speaking with Dr. Marriott. She was explaining us, I guess I could call it maybe indifference towards women during the civil rights era. So, Dr. Marriott, I'll let you finish your thought.
And would you state your question again? There was a little bit of activity in the background when you were talking.
Right. I'm going to give you a chance to finish your response because you said it wasn't misogyny, but it wasn't that.
No, I would not consider it misogyny. Oh, yeah. This is important to understand that during World War II, women went to work. Men were fighting on the battlefield. And there was a great movement to bring women into the workforce. Once the war was over, there was a great movement or a cultural shift. I'm going to call it a cultural shift to get women back in the homes so that the men could return to employment. That cultural shift impacted everybody, and it impacted people in different ways. Black men were not excluded from the cultural shift that was taking place to put women back in their place. So I would not call it misogynism. I would call it it's more related to the cultural shift that was taking place. And cultural shifts like that, especially when any form of mass media is used, impacts all of society. So black men were not excluded. And as a result, that cultural shift and that way of looking at society and the role of women was integrated, probably unconsciously, into the civil rights movement. And I think it's important because I don't want it to be said that black men were women haters. They were not. You know, that is not our experience as black women. But we did have the experience of being put in our place in the civil rights movement and other aspects of the black culture and the black community and black institutions in particular, because that is the arena in black institutions where black men were actually empowered. The churches, the predominantly the what we call now the historically black homes.
Right.
So wherever there was the opportunity, they were manifesting the cultural shift that was actually taking place.
Right, and I'm glad you explained that for us because we got to step aside because our next guest, Dr. Dennis Kimbrough, is on deck. But before we let you guys go, how can folks reach you? Because you mentioned that it may be too late for this year, for the road trip for this year, but maybe next year they can make it. How can they reach you guys?
Sure. I'll give out some information, Carl. But let me give a shout out to Kim Poole, Mama Day, Teaching Artists Institute, the International Civil Rights Museum, and the YMCA. But they're our partners and sponsors, and I wouldn't go anywhere without a black woman. No movement. But I'll give out my phone number, 410-888-8255.